All right, welcome back for the final session of JekyllConf 2015. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our eighth and final speaker, Parker Moore. Uh, he's speaking with us from San Francisco today. Currently, he's a software engineer at VSCO, and he's previously worked as a consultant to the GitHub Pages team at Six Windkinder and undertaken various IT responsibilities at Cornell University. A contributor to Jekyll since December 2012, Parker has put a massive amount of effort into Jekyll since then, and I think that's no better demonstrated than by this image from the GitHub GitHub Pages commits graph. You can see Parker's commits there, and it looks pretty much like the end of the whole commits graph. So no offense to any of the other contributors, but I just want to say that the man has almost 2,000 commits, and after Jumbo and the number 3 and 4 guys, there's a massive difference between how much Parker's committed, and I just really want to acknowledge that. Parker, I can think of no one more fitting to round out our conference today than the project leader, and I can see sitting there getting ready to speak. He's super excited to be talking to you guys. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Parker to hear about Jekyll 3.0 and where we go from here.
Hey everyone, so excited to be here today. Really just so thrilled. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. It's about 3:15 p.m. The sun is shining, so we're in really good spirits over here in San Francisco. Hope everyone else is as well. So I'm just going to get right into it here. Share your entire screen. Let's do it. Do it. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about Jekyll 3 and beyond. First, I just want to give a series of thanks. This is going to be like an Oscar speech, so strap in here. I'm going to thank Cloud Cannon for hosting this conference, for supporting the Jekyll community with this amazing tool. If you didn't see Mike's talk, you should go back and watch it when the recordings are available. An absolutely amazing tool. If you have been working with clients at all to produce Jekyll sites, this is a fantastic resource, so I highly recommend you take a look into it. I want to thank all the other speakers for taking the time today to give their talks and for the time in the last week or two to prepare what they were going to say. It means the world to me, and I think to the rest of the Jekyll community that they were willing to share their insights and their learnings over the last couple of years or last period of time that they've been using Jekyll. I also want to thank GitHub, especially Ben Bolter, Garen Tarikian, Kobe Chappelle, and Joel Glovier for their support of me and of Jekyll via contributions and, of course, via GitHub pages. I want to thank Tom Preston Warner, of course, for trusting and Matt Rogers and I to take over Jekyll and run with it. And, of course, to Tom, Nick Quaranto, and other early contributors for creating and sharing Jekyll with the world. I want to thank each of you contributors to Jekyll and its various plugins and documentation for making Jekyll way better for everybody. Without the contributors, I know I have a bunch of commits, but most of them are merge commits because you guys do so much work, and we are so grateful for all of the work that you put in to making this product better for everyone. And then I want to thank you guys who are watching today for taking the time today to attend this conference and for using Jekyll, of course. The community is the bedrock of a great open source experience, and it really wouldn't be the same without you. So thank you guys so much. And last but not least, I want to thank the Jekyll core team for being so dope and for going above and beyond the call of duty to help move Jekyll forward. These are Jordan, Matt, and Alfred. So thank you so much. Continuing on, I'm Parker. I am on the Jekyll core team. I took over Jekyll in 2013, right at the end of 2013, right at the end of 2012, and have been running with it ever since. And it's great fun. I'm a software engineer, as was mentioned, at a place called Visco, a visual supply company. We make photography software. You might have heard of ViscoCam. It is awesome. If you're looking for a job, we're looking for full-stack developers, as well as DevOps, as well as iOS and Android, as well as imaging experts. So hit me up if you feel like you might be worthy for, or interested in one of these positions. So I'll dive right into it. I'm going to talk about Jekyll 3 today, as well as where we're going forward. And first I want to dive into the philosophy. So when we first said we're going to start with Jekyll 3, like master is now going to be Jekyll 3, what did we say? We said we want to focus on certain philosophy, or a certain philosophy, certain principles that will make Jekyll 3 fantastic. What are we working toward? Why are we making a new version? Why not just make it a minor bump? So what we're going to do is walk through each of these three pieces of the philosophy. First is simplicity. This is reducing pain in your day-to-day use of Jekyll. This is to eliminate confusing and hidden behavior, the so-called magic. This is to reduce the pain in installation. If you've ever used Windows, you know how painful this is. If you don't have the development headers installed on Linux, you know how painful this is, etc. So it can be incredibly difficult. Simplicity also means reducing the pain and maintaining our code base, like the Jekyll code base. What does it mean for us to be able to move faster, move forward more easily in terms of code review, etc. Jekyll is already pretty simple, but we definitely have lots and lots of room to improve. So if you have any suggestions, please feel free to file an issue. We would love to hear from you. And the primary question here with simplicity is, does it do what you expect? When you go to use Jekyll and you type a command or you edit something or you make some change, you give it some input basically, does it do what you would expect it to do? And if the answer is no, then we're going to have a problem. Piece number 2 of our philosophy is extensibility. How do we make it super easy to teach Jekyll new tricks? How do we make it easier? So the core we want to keep as small as possible. The core should really just be this small little engine that lets everything else go. So how do we build plugins? How do we dog food? How do we eat our own dog food, basically, to make sure that we're building a plugin system that is excellent, that supports subcommands, that allows for multiple converters. So we took a hard look at our plugin system and other plugin systems around for other static site generators, as well as just a plugin for WordPress or I don't know, anything else, any other piece of software. And generally, they tend to be hook-based, especially when you have something like Jekyll, which is a pipeline of transformations, basically. So what we've been working on, and what a guy named Steve Cross is working on at the moment, it's still in PR, and if you have time, please go check it out. It is a hook-based plugin system, so you can insert code sort of surgically to the greatest effect. That also improves sort of contracts around what the input and output should be, etc. And our third piece is speed. We want to reduce the generation time. This has been one of the biggest things that people have asked for. Allowing for super fast iteration, allowing you to work as fast as you possibly can is really what we're going for here. The speed of producing content, the speed of installing Jekyll. So if you have a colleague who's going to start up, or a friend, someone you're working with, making a Jekyll site with, how can we make it super easy for them to get started, for them to go from 0 to 60 as fast as possible, as well as speed of making a new site. How do you go from I have this idea to I have this full site deployed out and viewable by the world in as little time as possible? So those are our 3 main tenets of the philosophy: simplicity, extensibility, and speed for Jekyll 3. So diving into some new features. These are just the highlights, these first 3. There are so many new features. Check out the history.markdown file in the repo if you're interested in more. So this first one speaks to the speed tenet. Incremental regeneration. This was first asked for over 5 years ago, if you can believe it, in January of 2010. In January of 2010, Jekyll would take 20 seconds or 30 seconds to regenerate 300 posts. It still takes about that time. It's probably increased since then because we've added complexity over time, trying to check for various problems or handle errors, etc. So this new feature, incremental regeneration, written by Alfred and Matt from the core team, as well as other contributors who have improved it since we've released it in beta. It keeps track of dependencies and ensures only what you change is regenerated. So if you change a layout, it only regenerates the files which depend on that layout, etc. It's currently sort of in beta at the moment. We're still working out some of the kinks. Please, if you can, test it and submit bugs. with the site that you're working on, as well as the .jekyll-metadata file, it'd be good to be able to sort of see the entire situation. It'd be good to make sure that any bugs are caught. The next piece is Liquid 3. These are performance improvements that Shopify has made in the core Liquid library around lexing and rendering. Nothing really has changed in terms of breaking compatibility because they have all of Shopify.com that they have to ensure still works. So they aren't going to make a lot of crazy improvements, or sorry, crazy breaking changes, excuse me. They also wrote something called Liquid C, which is a C extension for Liquid that makes it crazy fast and really, really, really improves performance. So if you're finding that your site is taking a long time and you think it's Liquid, then check Liquid C out. It'll probably cause problems on Windows, but it should be cross-compatible. If it's not, then boot up a Vagrant VM or something. I promise it's not too painful. But using something like Liquid C, which provides much greater performance and stability, has been really great. I've been using Jekyll Master for the last couple weeks, and it's awesome. So hooks for plugins as well. So this is our hook-based plugin system. Like I said, Jekyll's like a pipeline for your content. You should be able to hook into every step in the pipeline and change the content or metadata, or add or remove content, add or remove pages, posts, documents, collections. You should be able to manipulate your site in any way you want in the plugins. So what this allows is for better assumptions about input. You know that if you have a post pre-render, that you're going to be given a post, and the post will be in a state that you'd expect it to be before it's about to be run through rendered, which is the step that runs it through Liquid, basically. Every post, every page, every document runs through a read, a transform, a render, and a write step. So how can we, as well as the site itself, so how can we ensure that we're offering extensibility, offering input into these various steps along the regeneration path that allows for the greatest flexibility for you all. So two quick examples. So Jekyll Mentions, we can put that. Jekyll Mentions is something that Ben Balter mentioned earlier, a plugin that GitHub wrote that transforms, if you type in your content in a post or page or document, and then username. So if I write @PARKR for my username, what that will do when you include that gem, that plugin, is that will run that through the HTML pipeline at mentions parser. And what that does is that turns it into a link. So @Parker, just writing that out, once you regenerate your site, it creates @Parker link to github.com/Parker. You can also change the base name. So if they're Twitter handles instead of GitHub handles, then you can configure that as well. So something like that right now is just a generator, which is not a really great place for it to go. It can muck with Markdown. It can muck with everything. So at the moment, it's not in a great state. We don't really have the contract, we aren't inserting that code into the right place in the pipeline. So in the future, what we can do once this hook-based plugin stuff is merged, we can create a pre-render or a post-render that ensures that we have the right content that we can run then through the Jekyll Mentions plugin to produce the correct output. It's probably be a post-render. Another example is live reload. So when the site is done writing, so the post-write hook in the site object, you could trigger live reload, and your browser could automatically reload. Something like that could be really powerful. And this is also nice for if you have like a post render or post write, something along those lines for assets you can plug into and modify and compile, minify, fingerprint, whatever you need to do. You can do at a certain point. So we're really excited about this in Jekyll 3. There are of course lots and lots of smaller wins. There's so much more. There's better Windows support. We've removed the hard dependency on Python and Node.js with the Rouge highlighter and removing CoffeeScript by default. We're going to change over _post to be compliant with collections. So then post_post will be considered the posts collection. So we'll bring in a lot of new features that posts has, like post.next, for example. You can go from A to B to C just by referring to A.next is B, etc. Bringing in features like that into collections. Really excited about that. Will Norris wrote extensionless URLs. So if you are very interested in removing that .html from your various HTML pages, then with a little fun from your with your Nginx server or whatever you're working with, you can absolutely link to slash base name or whatever it is, and we'll write out a slash basename.html file, and then but then your internal links, Liquid, will understand that it ought to be slash blah 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 slash blah 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 without the extension. That wasn't very lucid, but you'll get it. Greater liquid consistency for documentation at the moment, or docs rather, the collection docs. Right at the moment, posts and pages and layouts and collection documents and etc. All of these things are somewhat mixed up, somewhat jumbled. And by bringing in post as collection, bringing in this greater consistency, then when you access page.x, it'll look the same no matter what sort of data you're accessing. And so I mean, there are lots of other smaller wins as well. If you look through the history.markdown file in the repo, it's so exciting. I'm really, really, really excited to release Jekyll 3, and we are hoping to release it in the next few weeks. So stay tuned. If you're creating a new Jekyll 2 site, now or next week or whatever, most of it, if not all of it, will still work with Jekyll 3. One consideration we've had during the creation of Jekyll 3 is that it's really, really, really important that we don't break sites, or if we do break sites, provide some compatibility layer. Things like sunsetting Maruku. If you really need Maruku, you'll have to write a custom plugin for that now. We have the code in our Git history, of course, that you can take and turn into a plugin if you'd like. But sunsetting some older, antiquated things might break some sites. But in general, you should be updating your sites to use as much as possible the quote latest and greatest. Luckily for us, we've had such a long history, the last 6 or 7 years, I guess, that we've been around, maybe longer than that. So, yeah, 7 years. To the benefit to be very flexible with lots of older technologies as well. So we're really excited for Jekyll 3. I hope you are as well. Let's move on. So we released Jekyll 3 in a couple weeks. Where are we headed then? So we're dealing with daily bug fixes and any questions that are arising, any UX improvements and with the command line, etc. What does the future hold? Some of what I've had in mind, you've heard today. You've heard it from Brandon. You've heard it from Tom. Some recap, some Octopress features that Brandon has written that I'd love to, once they're very stable and everyone's happy with them, sort of start to fold into Jekyll. Things like theming. That would be a huge win for portability and extensibility. What if you could write a Jekyll theme using Octopress Inc? That would be amazing. Ship that. You can provide that for clients. They can simply put it in to their Jekyll site and replace files where needed, but you provide the assets and you provide all the sort of base information. Incredibly huge win. We're really excited to see where Octopress Inc. goes. We're watching that very closely. Things like multilingual, multi-language sites. Huge win for anything from a corporation that operates multinationally, or any multilingual blogs. If you speak German and Russian and it's English or whatever, and you'd like to write posts in various languages but separate them out, such that as a native English speaker, I want to go and see just the English post because I won't be able to read the others, then I can have a nice viewing experience, etc. Things like one command deploys. Octopress deploy has been huge. Huge win for newbies, especially if you don't know how to deploy, or you don't want to worry about having to deploy and having to organize your Git history in a certain way, or anything like that, or organize your S3 buckets. Then having something like Octopress deploy folded somewhat into Jekyll or as a Jekyll extension, and really integrating that and making sure that Jekyll is providing the best possible support for that can be a huge win. So you can develop your website just like normal, run something like Octopress deploy, and boom, it's out there, it's ready to go, and your readers have the latest and greatest. Something not related to Octopress, something like a plugin registry. We have all of these amazing plugins, all of these fantastic plugins. If you go to the JekyllRB.com/docs/plugins page, you'll see that there are so many fantastic plugins. How can we make those more visible? How can we make it easier for you as a user of Jekyll to find those plugins, to really ensure that you aren't duplicating too much effort, that you know, when you go to write something, when you go to write a site, that you can extend it in a way that doesn't require so much work. So having some sort of plugin registry with searching and et cetera would be a huge win for adding new features to your site with, you know, almost no work. Eventually we could have themes as well folded into there, because plugins and themes would be nearly identical. Just, you know, themes would work with something like Octopus Ink and would have different behavior, but they'd all basically be plugins in the end. Excuse me. And we, you know, talking about the community, what do we want the community to look like in a year, in 6 months, in 3 weeks? What do we want that? How do we best want to serve you? Such that you can discuss things, share ideas, learn from each other, such that we can all collaborate on Jekyll sites, etc. Make that as easy as possible. What do you want to see in Jekyll core? What features do you think Jekyll lacks? How can we best support that? Is it via a plugin? Is it via, you know, is it something on GitHub Pages? Can we talk with the GitHub team to try to bring something like that into their ecosystem? If you have any ideas, please post on talk.jekylrb.com, a new discourse forum we've set up under the feedback category. It'd be really great. I'm personally gonna watch that very closely. And other things like newsletters or other conferences. This conference has been wonderful. I've learned so much about the way in which Jekyll has been used, things that I didn't know, and I've been, you know, working on it for 2 years. So how can we best serve the community, best grow the community, increase the diversity within the community? On a daily basis, I work with mostly like white guys who are pretty privileged. You know, how can we expand that? How can we bring everybody, make it a very inclusive environment? Make it, you know, the best possible place it can be. The internet, our little corner of the internet, the best possible place it can be for everyone who's interested in joining in. So yeah, that's sort of the beyond. Just a huge thanks to you, everyone who's watching this right now, who's watching this later. You are really the reason that Jekyll exists and why we keep working on it. As Tom mentioned earlier, like no one would have picked up Jekyll if it wasn't a fantastic product with a great community, and the community is really what makes Jekyll amazing. What like keeps me so happy working on it all the time. Use talk.jekylrb.com. That's an amazing resource. It's a forum site, discourse forum, and it has been wonderful. I've already learned so much about what you guys are doing, what we're all doing in the Jekyll community to make Jekyll as amazing as possible. If you ever spot a problem, you know, in the documentation or you spot some like edge case, submit documentation. All the documentation is on GitHub in the Jekyll repo in the site directory. You can go in there from github.com and you can actually click edit in the top right of the view of the content in the page, and just submit your change right then and there, and we'll review it and we'll merge it if it's if everything looks great. If you've written a blog post, if you've made an amazing Jekyll site that you want to share with the rest of the world, with the rest of the community, please share that on talk.jekylrb.com. Share it on Twitter. I'm not going to retweet a lot of things just to keep timelines pretty clean. But maybe something like it will create this newsletter and you'll be shared in the newsletter or something like this. Basically creating. When you've learned something great, if you are interested and comfortable sharing that, we can learn so much from what you've learned, and we would love to. If you ever have a question, also, please ask that. Talk.jekylrb.com is a wonderful resource. So thanks again for everyone who has tuned in to watch this, who's contributed to Jekyll. Thanks again to Cloud Cannon for hosting, and happy Jekylling. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Parker. Got a couple of questions here, both technical and about the community. First of all, diving right into technical. This is from our own CTO at Cloud Cannon. You have the output flag on a collection item, Have you ever thought of adding multiple outputs, i.e. render it on a JSON layout and add an HTML layout at different paths for each item?
Yeah, we've thought of that. So that's been suggested a couple times. The difficulty that I have with it at the moment is that it starts to introduce a little bit of weird magic. So when if it's not explicit enough, if it's not really, really, really explicit enough, then it can cause a lot of problems. Right now, and it has been historically, layouts are just HTML. You can only have HTML layouts. Everything has to be output that way, or you have a blank layout, right? Like layout now, null. This has been true for 7 years. So if we start introducing new paradigms with multiple outputs, basically through layouts, how do we manage that? How do we ensure that it's explicit, that it's direct? Is it multiple? You specify layout : and then give it an array. Is it via the output flag and the configuration.yaml? That has some drawbacks because when you change the configuration.yaml, we don't regenerate the site. The way with the new configuration, we keep the old configuration from before. So there are lots of things to think about, and we didn't think that we could do that right in time for Jekyll 3. But that's definitely something on our radar.
Cool. You mentioned briefly talking about ease of deploy, and it's been a reasonably common theme, ease of use through today. Do you have an official position on how far down the easy to install path that you'd like to see Jekyll go?
Easy to install or easy to deploy?
Yeah, so you mentioned easy to deploy, but do you have a position on easy to install?
So the easy to install is something that I've been trying to work on for a very long time, and it's something that has been somewhat frustrating for me. So in Jekyll 3 we've reduced the dependencies from something like 15 to 4 or 5. So we've really tried to make it easy. We don't include any C extensions by default. We don't do anything that would cause a lot of headaches. So it's all pure Ruby that we download initially, and we download as few gems as possible. So we've tried to make it easier to install with gem install Jekyll. That said, there's so many users who would be very interested in something like a GUI application. So I've tried my hand and failed, unfortunately, for a Mac application that, in the title bar or something, you could click, start serving my site at this path, and you could store sites, something like integrate pages into GitHub for Mac or something. What does that look like? Try to make it as easy as possible to spin up a Jekyll server in a GUI-like environment, so that you don't even have to touch the command line in order to get started. Something like that folds in very nicely with a Mac. A Mac application can just have the binary with it, can have Ruby with it, it can just have everything that you could possibly want right there as a downloadable DMG or something. So we've tried it. I've tried it, but we haven't gotten very far. It's really about time. It's difficult for there's so many things. I work full time. There's so many applications in life that eventually you sort of say, I want to move the product forward. We can try the installation stuff, reducing dependencies, all of those things. But ultimately, what it comes down to is a lack of time for something like a one-click installer.
No, that's fine. That's perfectly justified. I mean, open source has all of these constraints, and where everyone's got lives as well. So that's right. No explanation needed there. I was personally really excited to see talk.JekyllRB.com come into existence earlier this year, because I mean I got introduced to Jekyll mid to late last year, so I haven't been around that long. But it was clear that when we were trying to find the community, where were they? So talk.JekyllRB.com has been really nice. I mean, how have you seen people adopt that? Has it been going well, or is it feeling as active as the GitHub issues used to be for non-technical issues, as I understand the GitHub issues used to be used like?
Absolutely. People are still learning about talk.JekyllRB.com, and you can authenticate, luckily, with something like GitHub or Twitter, so you don't have to sign up for a new account if you don't want to, but some of that's been a barrier. Why do I need another account? I can just use the GitHub issues. So we're still getting questions on Jekyll, like the main repo. But it's been growing. People are really excited about it. Like, discourse is completely different than GitHub issues, and I wasn't convinced until I started using it that it's been such a wonderful resource. So yeah, I think it's been fantastic, and we've seen a lot of activity. If you just go to the homepage, you can see all of our topics that we started. There are thousands of views on multiple topics. So I think people are liking it. Let me know if there's anything we can do to improve it. And thanks to Jordan from the core team who set it all up, and to one of his clients whose name I unfortunately don't remember, who sponsored the sort of the infrastructure. So
awesome. You did touch on this a little bit at the end of your talk, but can you just go over again? Other than contributing code, what are some of the ways that the community can get involved with Jekyll?
The best way, in my opinion, is to write. So you have this Jekyll site, you have maybe a blog, or you have documentation site or something. Create a Jekyll site. The best way to contribute to the Jekyll community is to create something with Jekyll. Then, once you've done that, go ahead and share that on something like talk.jekylrb.com on Jekyll Talk. It's such a wonderful resource. Whenever I look at the graphs for our repository, the most visited wiki page is the site's wiki page. It has something like 1,100 Jekyll sites with the source linked right there. So you can see the output and you can see the source, and that's an amazing learning experience, learning opportunity, and that's something that I think accelerates people's interest and really hooks people into the product, because this tool, because there's so many resources there. So the best thing you can possibly do to contribute is to make something with Jekyll and tell us about it. After that, contribute documentation. It's all a Jekyll site. You know how to do that, so feel free to just hop in there and contribute something. And beyond that, if you have ideas, if you have, hey, I think this would be amazing, take a stab at it, submit a PR, open an issue, take a stab at it, open a pull request. We'd love to take a look at it and work with you through it, and find its way either into a plugin that we can talk about on Jekyll RB, or Jekyll Talk rather, or into Jekyll Core directly. So.
Awesome. One of the things that I really wanted to see come out of this conference, and I don't think it happens just through a single talk or just through a single blog post, but is the establishment of some best practice. I know that some of the feedback I've had from people, especially in enterprise that we talk to about using Jekyll, is they say it's so customizable, it's so flexible that I'm scared of doing it one way in case the next person that I hire wants to do it another way. If we do want to start establishing some best practice, how do you think that starts? Where do you think that happens? Who's involved in the conversation?
I think things like best practices, and apologies for the siren in the background, the best practices are always evolving, right? So if you create a website in Jekyll in 2008 or 2009, and then you create a Jekyll site today, you're going to have different best practices. Just because features change, the way input and output might work will change. There's always change in the product, so you'll have to sort of evolve with that. But best practices, I think, are really created through the community, through discussion. Best practices around JavaScript, for example, seem to be totally created by Nodeland, people who are actively writing it and said, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this. This fourth thing that I tried really worked. Here's my rationale, and they wrote about it and they shared it and they talked about it. And I think those best practices come from discussion. Jekyll started off, as Tom mentioned earlier, as like blogging for hackers, kind of. It used to be called Autoblog when it was like first created. If you go to the very first commit, you'll see like lib autoblog.rb, module autoblog, etc. So it's really stemmed out of the idea that I want to own my content. I want it to be on the file system. I can put it up, to GitHub or whatever, into some hosting platform, never lose it. But I want it to be customizable. I want to be able to say that this content, I want this content to be what I want it to be on the output, basically. I want to be able to control that. So naturally, we're going to have a tendency to focus on customizability, but we've really been pushing back with our tenet of simplicity to try to dumb it down, try to make one way of doing it, and if we really get sort of pushback and say, I really wish I could do it this way, either changing it and then providing the compatibility layer, or really allowing both, allowing configuration. For example, collections are right now only allowed in your root directory. One thing that we've heard a lot about is like we'd really like to be able to put all of our collections into one subfolder. If we can put them all in one subfolder, I can have two repos. I can have a submodule. The submodule is what is just pulled into a repo that my web developers think about, and then the submodule, the content repo, basically can be where my people in content, in marketing, etc., can all work with. So then it becomes nice separation of content versus sort of display. And that becomes like a nicer way to do layouting and things like that with the current Jekyll system. So things like that have those sorts of best practices and feature changes as a result have just come naturally as a result of discussion. So
cool.
I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that does. That's good. It's nice to hear how it's like comes together like that. I don't have any more questions for you at the moment, but if you want to give us your parting words, I'll hand over back to you.
My only parting words are thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who participated today. Thank you for everyone who's created something for Jekyll, with Jekyll. It's such a wonderful experience to be a part of this community and to have had a hand in making Jekyll really fun with all of you. So just my parting words are thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Parker. Thank you for making all of this possible and keeping Jekyll alive.